So he comes out of the kitchen, and he doesn't say a word. He walks straight up, left hand up under my neck, jacks me up off the floor. I'm up on the stove. Like, he looks me dead in the eyes, and he says, I'm going to kill you. And so he cocks his hand back, and he's bringing it forward. I can see it coming, and I kind of lift up my chin, and his momentum carried him, across the hand that he was holding me with, and he kind of stumbles like a step or two to the left. He's going to football tackle me or whatever he's going to do. He's charging. So I take out the gun, and I fire. Boom, boom, boom. He immediately falls back. Boom. Called 911. He flipped on me, tried to attack me, said he was going to kill me. I had to shoot him. I shot him twice in the chest.
Welcome back to the Locked In with Ian Bick podcast. Corrupt detectives, overzealous prosecutors, expensive lawyers, fighting for your life. We get into it all in this episode, in which we have Chip Williamson to share his incredible story and journey of how an argument over a woman leads him to having to defend himself, ultimately resulting in charges that could have landed him in prison for life. Folks, we now have new merch in stock. Go to ianbick.com to check out our selection of hoodies, t-shirts, and beanies just in time for the holiday season. My personal favorite, the beanies are great, they're comfortable, and they look awesome. You guys can use code LOCKEDIN at checkout to receive 10% off your order. That's code LOCKEDIN at ianbick.com. Thank you so much to all of our viewers and listeners that not only tune in week after week, but also tell their friends, their family, their coworkers about this podcast and help get the word out there. It means the absolute world, and I wouldn't be here without you guys. Remember, you can help support our show by hitting the subscribe button on YouTube or giving us a follow and review on whichever site you listen to this podcast. I hope you guys sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview with Chip Williamson. Chip, welcome to Locked In.
Glad to be here, my brother. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. Where are you traveling from us today?
I come up from Charleston, South Carolina. So Breeze Airways got me here pretty quick, direct flight. Not too bad of a flight, and I go home tomorrow.
Isn't Breeze amazing? Like, it came out of nowhere, and this thing is taking over.
I know, and like I come to New York quite a bit because I do some podcasting as well, and like those direct flights to New York or Islip, Long Island, depending on where you go, and it's really convenient, and they're cheap. And most of the time I'm in and out, it's usually a day travel, so don't even really need to pack up, a huge bag. I love them. And I've flew Spirit a few times. Spirit's a lot less uncomfortable than Breeze.
Breeze makes me remember like the original days of JetBlue, what JetBlue was trying to be with the cheap, low flight. Now it's like more mainstream and it's expensive, but Breeze is less than $100 round trip. You can't beat that.
Oh, yeah. I think I flew to Tampa earlier this year, and I bought tickets on Black Friday. They were $25 a piece each way.
Wow.
So $50. And then I was staying a few days, so I actually had to take a bag. I had to pay $30 for the bag each way. So I paid more for the bag to fly up there than I did. I'd have been cheaper trying to buy the bag a seat.
Isn't that insane? Now, your name isn't actually Chip, right?
Correct. It's actually Wade Williamson. Wade's my government name.
How do you get the name Chip?
It was a nickname that I got when I was real little. And I liked it better than Wade at the time, honestly. And so it's weird. It's in all of my annuals coming through high school. It's on a debit card that I have. And I don't have it anymore. It was from like the local bank where I grew up. But it's not even like nowhere near my real name. But they had Chip on the debit card that I used for years. So I stuck with it all the way through high school. And then after that, starting to put in for jobs and whatnot, I was on with this company called Nucor Steel. I was working with them in Columbia, and then I went to transfer to the division in Charleston. So they're calling back, and it was like, hey, we need the records for Chip Williamson. I was like, we don't have a Chip Williamson. And he's like, you mean Wade? And then so that's when I was like, all right, I might need to get rid of Chip and actually go by Wade, getting into more of the, the job things and such. And I just started going by Wade again. So on the Facebook, it's still Chip because like everybody back home knew me as that. But now all the newer people that meet me, they know me as Wade. So.
Which one do you prefer?
I'll go with Wade now.
Wade?
Yeah.
Either one of them goes. Like, you look like a Chip, but you also look like a Wade.
Yeah. And, like, the nickname that I had one friend, and he actually gives me the name that I go by on the podcast. I had one friend in school that always called me Wade. Because he knew I didn't really like it, that's what he always called me. And he called me Hollywood Wade one time. And because, like, back in the day, I had a friend of mine that worked at or his mom worked at a video store. So you remember VHS days, we're going back a minute. You could hook up 2 VCRs and dub movies. So you play one on one VCR and you record it to the other VCR. Mm-hmm. So I used to do that all the time. So I had like every movie you could think of. Well, back in the day when we would get together for the weekends, we'd say, all right, well, go to somebody's house. And you only had like 2 video stores. You had Hollywood Video and Blockbuster Video. And so the guy was like, we don't even need to go to Hollywood Video. We got Hollywood Wade. And so I did like that nickname. And then so when I started the podcast, that's actually the name that I used was Hollywood Wade.
Well, you remember when you had to have the separate device to rewind the tape? That just brought back a flood of memories.
Oh, man. I tell my son about it now, and he don't have a clue what I'm talking about. I'm like, man, they would even tax you, I think, like 50% if you didn't rewind the tape when you brought it back to the store.
Oh, man. The times.
A racket they had. And like, now you can't even find a VCR.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard. Somebody's got one. It's like vintage now.
It's even hard to find DVDs. Everything's streaming and all of that.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Straight to your phone. It's crazy how far technology's come, my brother.
Now, Wade, you have an insane story. You've documented it on your own channel, on other people's podcasts that we know of on YouTube. You search your name, you're all over the place. Mm-hmm. Let's start at the top of that story. What was your childhood like? Where are you from? How'd you grow up?
So I grew up in a town called Darlington, South Carolina. Really not a whole lot there except for it's got one of the biggest NASCAR or one of the bigger NASCAR tracks, one of the oldest. That's really all it is, man. Small town. Grew up, both parents in the household, had an older sister. So a very average childhood. I wasn't like a troublemaker, wasn't a trouble kid, pretty decent grades. If anything, I was always the hustler. Like I was the buy for $1 or sell for $2 type, like with the movies. We would go drag racing sometimes. I had a Mustang, and so everyone would go to the drag strip to do racing on Wednesday nights. We had all the bootleggers out there that would sell like the CDs, but they would have them before the stores would have them. They'd get them like a week or two early. So this is like right on the cusp of CD burning being a thing. And so I would buy them from them, go home and burn like, 10 copies of them, then go to school and sell them to everybody at school. And I was also beating out the other people that were doing that too because they couldn't get them until the actual release date. So I was getting them, a week or two before. And so that was just always my thing. I was always the hustler, legal, even though that wouldn't turn that legal, but you know what I'm saying. Never into drugs or anything like that, but just, quick way to make a buck. And that was how I always was. And I went to school for welding, graduated, went to college, went to Florence Darling Technical College. And welding was kind of the avenue that I was going to go after. And I went to a course that we were finishing up, and there was a company that just opened up where I lived, and you could exempt the last few months of the course and go straight into the workforce there. So that's what I did. Around about this time, my mom and dad did separate, and she met somebody, and she was like, if you're going to be working now, I'll move out, and you can stay in the house. You just pay the bills, and pay me, I'll pay the bills, and you can have the house to yourself because you're kind of fixing to become an adult. And so that's what I did. Like my first actual job, started, staying by myself. I had a roommate over, of course, so it was just partying, man, enjoying life, working, partying. It was a perfect schedule for me at the time. I worked 4 10s, so I would go in at like 3 in the afternoon, work till like 1, and be done. And after Thursday night, I was done to the weekend. I didn't have to worry about it till Monday evening. So, you can do a lot of partying in that span of time. And, that's what I did for a real long time. And then I'm out at this club one night. And I knew everybody in my neighborhood. Like the club we went to was, a local club to where I was at. So I knew most of everybody that come in there. And I was sitting in there, and this girl comes walking in. Beautiful. And I was just like, who is that? And she happened to be talking to a classmate of mine. And so I went up to her, and I was just like, who is that girl you were talking to? And she's like, oh, I met her out here last weekend. Her name's Felicia. And I'm like, well, you got to, introduce me. Because I'd never seen her before. I knew she wasn't from around there. And so we go up, and she does introduce us, and we get to talking. And, I was kind of flirting best I could back in those days. And we exchanged numbers. And after that, I didn't really hear from her. And I'd say probably like 2 or 3 weeks goes by. This was like in October, November-ish. And we're fixing to go back out there again. They were having some kind of big event. So I text her and I'm like, hey, you going to this event? She's like, yeah. So we go out there and it just kind of slowly started transitioning into a relationship. And so she eventually moved in and, things just really were on a fast track. We got engaged fairly quickly. We did not get married right off the bat. We got engaged fairly quickly. And we're living our best life, man. We're partying it up on the weekends. We're going to work during the week, and it's some of the funnest memories I've ever had in my life because, sometimes when girls come into the mix, they'll try to like pull a guy away from his friends. And this was the exact opposite. She joined in. She became one of the crew. And, she would a lot of times be like the mom, cleaning up after somebody, puked all over the floor or something like that. So she was kind of like the house mom in the group. And, we had a great time. And I'd say probably about 6 years after that, we did decide to get married. Now, I'm still living in Darlington at the time, but I got on with the company I was telling you about, Nucor Steel. And I was driving back and forth working night shift to Columbia, South Carolina, me and a couple other buddies. And it was draining. I hate working third shift anyway, but it was long hours. Just, you felt like you had no energy to give the world. And I was just like, I'm trying to get on. They have a company, as crazy as it is, in Darlington where I lived. But it was one of those places where it's like impossible to get on. You got to know somebody or somebody's got to die or something. I mean, it's just really hard because you make good money. And so it's one of those jobs, once people get it, they never leave. But people were having luck going to the Charleston division. So I was like, hey, I'm going to apply to go up there. We'll see what happens. What do you know they did? Now, right along the time when we got married, almost immediately after that, we found out she was pregnant. So she did have my son, and she already had a daughter when we got together. Her daughter was 3. So essentially now I got, the family, the daughter, the son, the wife, and we moved up to Charleston. And everything's going really good. I'd say probably for about a 3 or 4 year span. And then my wife's dad got cirrhosis of the liver and got real sick, and it really put a change in her whole demeanor, personality. He did wind up ultimately passing away. Great guy. And so it just done a total shift in her, understandably so. And so it was kind of like the person that I was used to was kind of turning into someone that I didn't really know, as in a sense of like, we didn't go out as much, we didn't do a lot, you know what I'm saying? But I understood why. And I was still very much an extrovert. Like, I loved going out and meeting people, and that just kind of put her where she wanted to stay home. So I'm not going to say that was like a big deal breaker, but because she never stopped me from going. But that was kind of like what started everything. And then eventually, I wound up getting in a real bad car accident. And that really started snowballing things. I don't know if you ever heard of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay. So they had what they call a Carolina Country Music Fest. It was like basically their countrified version of Woodstock. And this was something that she was on board of doing. She was like, it was her idea to go. She's like, hey, we should go to this thing. It's going to be like 3 days of music, concerts all the time. Should be really cool. So we go. I go up on Thursday after work. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, just the partying every single day. And so we're coming back on Monday, and I got to be to work at Tuesday morning. So I get back like Monday evening, barely slept this whole entire weekend. I think at one point in that weekend, I actually had a buddy of mine who was a medic give me an IV into my arm because I just had no sleep, and he had them in his bag. And it just like, I don't know if you ever had an IV, but it just rejuvenates you. It just puts you back to, 100 level energy. And so I'm trying to get everything straight because I hadn't been home before I go back to work. Heading in, get up at like 5 a.m. to head to work, fall asleep, run off the road, flip probably like, it's got to be like 9, 10 times. I don't really remember. All I remember is when I went off, you hear that sound that you hate to hear when you go off the road. And then it was like a loud bang, and I could tell I was airborne. And I mean, it's a constant flip, 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 flip. I finally land on top of a truck, upside down. So I'm driving like a Charger. So my car is upside down on top of another truck. And I'm trying to figure out like the best way to get down because I did have my seatbelt on. So I'm like making sure when I undo my seatbelt, I don't fall on my neck. The car eventually rolls off and now it's on its side. So I climb out, go to the door, man comes and I'm like, man, I had an accident. You know, I landed on top of your car out here. And he's like, that's my wife's truck. I've had that thing since she was in high school. And I'm just like, well, I'm sorry, bro. You know, I promise you I didn't do it on purpose. He just shuts the door. Like, didn't ask me if I was all right, need a drink of water, you know, call ambulance or nothing. But luckily, when I was climbing out, a guy come riding by and asked me if I wanted him to call an ambulance. And I told him, yeah, because I really wasn't sure if I was hurt or not. But for the most part, I was good. But I did bang my back up some. Now, I was out of work for a period of time, and they didn't move my job, but they filled it. And so when I came back, I had to go to a different department, which I hated. And, you know, obviously men, I'm sure, you know, like when you feel like you're not the same provider, because this job was less money also, even though it was with the same company, it starts to bother you if you feel like you're not doing your part. So that kind of started like a depression in me. And so you have what was going on with her, then what was going on with me. And then like the thing that really pushed it overboard was there was a friend of mine that we knew in that neighborhood. We would all get together on Fridays and hang out. Well, we got together one Friday, we're hanging out, and I could tell him and his wife were fighting a little bit, but, you know, I didn't get too much into their business because they weren't really one to tell at all like that, but you could tell there was a rift. So we leave, we're at a person's house hanging out. My wife's actually at a different couple's house in our neighborhood, and she calls me and she's like, hey, come over here where I'm at. So I'm like, all right, tell everybody bye, go over there, we're hanging out. 30 minutes later, you hear this scream. And it was a scream like you knew something was wrong, like something was bad wrong. So we kind of go out to the garage, figure out which way it is. Me and my buddy run down there, and there's a woman just like rolling around in the grass. And so I finally like stop her to see who it is, what's going on. And it's the wife of the woman that I just left where we were at. So apparently they left right after I left and went home, started fighting. Well, ultimately, whatever they were fighting about led him to commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
Because she tells me, she's like, you know, he did it, he shot himself. And I'm like, who? And she said, Chris. And so I go in the house. My buddy had went straight on in the house. I don't know what possessed him to do that, but he did. He went straight on in the house. And so when I come in, he's got like a big open area kitchen, living room. I cut around the corner, and he's laid there on the floor. My buddy's already up by his head, trying to like wrap the shirt around his head to do what he can. Ian, I tell you, it was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. Like, hands down, the worst. And, you know, we called 911. Obviously, they got there. There wasn't anything they could do. You know, he did ultimately lose his life that night. But, like, the mental images of that really just started, like, bothering me. And I was just like, you know, is this what arguing comes to? Is this what arguing every day leads you to? Like, doing this? Is this what's going to happen? And I made the decision not long after that I thought it was best me and my wife split up. Now, I want to be crystal clear about this. This was my decision. I told her that I didn't think we were going to work and that, you know, she was free to see whoever. We would figure it out. We would do it amicably. And, you know, I just didn't want to fight anymore. I was like, if anything, I'd rather part now where we can stay friends than, you know, stay together till we just literally hate each other. And she didn't want to do it. She was thinking there was ways we could work it out, but in my mind, there wasn't. Like, everything was piling up, work, all of that. You know, especially now what I just went through, I'm thinking, God, I don't want to get to that point to where I feel like that's the answer of what I got to do. And so we split up. And, you know, I left her in the house where we were at, and I was like, if you stay here, that's fine. I'll continue to pay the bills. But if you start to see somebody, then we're going to have to reconsider this negotiation because I don't want to pay you the bills here, but have another dude come by and sitting on my couch watching my TV, you know. And she was like, okay. And so a couple of months went by. This was in like July of 2017. So around October, she tells me that she did meet someone and that, you know, they're talking about possibly moving in together. And I'm just like, well, I know you ain't talking about moving into my house. And she's like, no, we're going to get somewhere else. And so I was like, all right, well, we can, you know, you just tell me when you're going to do it and I'll move back in. Because I was staying with a guy that lived in the neighborhood that had a spare room. So I could still be close to the kids and it wasn't as awkward. They were affected, but at this time, my son's like 6, and my daughter's like, I'd say 17.
And how old are you?
I'm 30 at this time. I'm 40 now, 7 years, so I'm like 33.
And just so the audience knows, you hadn't been arrested or anything in your whole life up until that point. Nothing.
No, I'd never been arrested. Speeding ticket, that was it.
Very normal. That was the first bit of tragedy and traumatic experience that you saw. Was that suicide?
Yeah. For something of that nature, I've been around grandparents that had passed away, but, that's an expected event. They had cancer and things like that. So as far as like something that's out of the blue, especially of that magnitude, that was my first experience with all that.
Yeah, so your life had been normal up until that point.
Yep.
Okay.
And then so that, like I said, compiled on the job issues, plus my back issues I'm dealing with from work. It was like I was just getting hit from all sides. And
all
I felt like
once,
I could do better with that by myself than opposed to fighting every day, because that was just another thing on the plate. And, we made a decision that she was going to move out November the 1st. So I remember distinctly, like it was yesterday, we walked around the neighborhood, took our kid trick-or-treating, and then that night I finished loading up a U-Haul that had all her stuff in it, and she went her way, and I went mine. Now, the neighborhood that she moved into, it's like the neighborhood where I'm from, it's one big neighborhood, but there's like 7 or 8 different subdivisions in the neighborhood. So she moved in one that was like 2 subdivisions back from me. So still close, so it was, if we had to drop off kids or one thing or another, it was still close. Now, we're amicable, we're speaking, but that's about it. We're not friends, when hanging out. It's say what we got to say and move on. And which I was content with, and I think she was too at that point, because she seemed to be happy. And so November, didn't really speak. December, also didn't really speak, unless we had to. Coming up on Christmas, got to figure out what we're going to do. It's the first Christmas, since the split. And I was in a little bit better of a headspace. I kind of come to terms with a few things, dealt with a few things, was trying to work through my stuff on my own. And I'm just like, how's things going with you? And she's like, not too great. And I'm just kind of laughing. I'm like, well, not a lot of people can put up with you type thing. And you could just tell by that little interaction that we had, there was still a little something there, little spark left. But I still didn't jump on it at that time. I was just, it was good just to have that conversation, bounce back and forth off each other. Well, we actually did go to her mom's for Christmas. Now, by then, they had actually moved in together, but then they not broke it off 100%, but he moved out. So he's not staying in her residence, but they're still talking. And so we go to her mom's, we do Christmas. And we're still not 100% sure if we want to kick this thing back off. We're kicking the tires, but we're not saying, okay, we're going to do it. So still January, February, March, I would check in with her. She would check in with me. And so around March, we think that we're going to give it another shot. And I'm just like, all right, so what's the status with you and him? And she's like, well, we're still seeing each other, but he's not living here anymore. He's living at an assisted VA housing facility. I was seeing someone, but I didn't have anyone living with me. I was just seeing them. And so I'm like, well, look, if we're going to do this, we got to cut off communication with everybody we're seeing. That's the only way it's going to work. And so we go to her parents for Easter weekend. And we tell them, hey, we're going to get back together. We let everybody know. They were extremely happy. Done Easter Sunday together. Leave there. We go to the beach for a couple of days. We see her aunt that lived at the beach. She posts pictures on Facebook. So there's documented proof there that we were together. We were with each other that weekend. When we come back, the deal is she's going to tell her guy on Friday that, what her plans are. We're going to get back together, and I'm going to tell my girl. So we come back. I told mine could have gave a shit less. She's on to the next dude. I didn't speak with her Friday night. Now, our son had a soccer game Saturday morning. So we go to the soccer game Saturday morning. I'm like, all right, well, how did he take it? And she's like, well, he didn't really talk. She said he come in, said he wasn't feeling good. He went straight to bed. She's like, I'm going to tell him today after we go home from this game. So I'm like, all right. Son has the soccer game, leave, come home. Then I don't hear from her for a couple hours. Then she calls. And she's like, yeah, he didn't take it too good. He got pissed. He left. But she said he's coming back. So she comes to my house when she's telling me all this. And I'm like, well, you don't know where he went? And she's like, no, not right off. And I'm like, well, if you don't know where he went, like if he comes by here, he sees your car here, it's going to cause issues Because I didn't know what she told him, the reason she told him. I just knew she said they were breaking it off, and he was upset. So I'm like, well, just go home. Let me know if anything gets out of hand or whatever, and I'll, do what I can, but just kind of, we don't need it coming over here yet, because my son was at the house with me at the time. So she goes home. Fast forward a couple hours later, my son is at the same guy that I told you was with me when my buddy committed suicide. He's like 6 houses down from me. My son's now at his house. I haven't heard anything from my wife in a few hours. And I didn't find all this out till later. Apparently, he comes back to the house. He starts getting violent. He roughs her up, headbutts her, pushes her against the wall, smashes her phone. So at that point, she's got no way to communicate. He makes her get in the car to ride around the neighborhood and look for me. Well, she rides up to the house of that guy where my son's at and pulls up to the driveway, and he comes walking up to the window. Now, he knows about the situation. He's pretty much was one of my best friends in the neighborhood. He knew everything that was going on from start to finish. And he walks up to the car, and he's like, hey, guys, what's going on? And he's like, oh, well, I'm looking for Chip, because when I find him, I'm going to fucking kill him. And said he's just kind of like, whoa, let's not, get into all that. I don't know what's going on. And he could tell that my wife was upset, because he didn't understand the dynamic, but he could just tell that she was upset, and obviously he's mad. So he tells her, he's like, will you drop him off here? And he's like, well, I don't want to be left here without a ride. He's like, if I come, I'll go get my truck and I'll come back. And so he agrees. I don't know what conversation they had all together, because I wasn't there, and I found out even that he said that after the fact. But she took him back home, and then he drove back over there. Before he drove back to that guy's house, he calls me on the phone. I'm still in the neighborhood. And he's like, hey, if you ride by here and you see Liam's car here, he's like, don't stop. And I'm like, all right, what's going on? I mean, I knew a little bit, but I didn't know where it was at this point. And he's like, well, Felicia was upset, and I'm just getting him to come over here to try to figure out what's going on. I just don't want anything going at my house. So if you ride by here and you see his car here, I don't want you to think anything's going on behind your back, but just don't stop. And I'm like, all right, I wasn't going to anyway, but I won't. So I go to my home. Now it's probably like 11 o'clock at night. I still haven't heard from my wife, and I don't really know why, especially since he's now there. So my daughter gets off from work, goes home, and my wife uses her phone to call me. That's when she kind of informs me that he had roughed her up and broke his. I don't even know if she told me that he roughed her up. I know she told me he broke her phone that night, and that's why she wasn't able to get in contact with me. But she's under the impression that he's staying. The guy's name was Jamie, that he was staying at his house and that they were good. And so I'm like, well, if he's staying there, then that's all I'm worried about. I just don't want him coming back there showing out when y'all are there. So I'm like, I'm fixing to lay down and go to bed. So I'm watching UFC. I forgot which fight it was. And then probably like 30 minutes after that, I get a text message. It's from the guy. And I've only met this dude one time since they were together. I knew what he drove, because obviously I had to go by there and drop my son off and pick him up. And we bumped into each other at a gas station. Interaction was very short, brief. We did speak, but that was pretty much the extent of it. I think I threw a little shot in there. He's like, I know the situation's fucked up, but it is what it is. And I'm just like, well, that's your problem now, boss. And I pulled off. This was like at the beginning, so I was still a smart ass to it.
Yeah.
And so he sends me a text, and he's like, hey, are you awake? And I said, yeah, I'm awake. And he's like, do you mind if we talk? And I'm like, no. So I'm thinking he's going to call me. And he sends another text, and he's like, I'm going to come over there if you're cool with it. He's like, no, as a matter of fact, we can just come to your buddy's house. And he's like, that way you're in a safe spot. He's like, I just want some answers. I feel like I'm being lied to, and I feel like you're going to be man enough to tell me the truth. And so I'm like, all right, I'll do that. And because it's only 6 houses down, my buddy's a pretty big damn dude. So I'm not really worried. He looks like a slightly slimmer version of Braun Strowman from WWE, like huge beard. I mean, he's a jacked dude. So I'm like, if anything gets out of hand, he'll be there. Now, mind you, the back injury that I kind of alluded to earlier, I had just had a procedure on my back to where they go in and they burn off the nerve endings.
Oh, wow.
I forgot the specific name of it. I think it's called an RFA. But basically, they burn the nerve endings from the spine, which alleviates pain for a little while, like 6 to 8 months. They'll eventually reattach, but that's the point of the procedure. So I just had this done like a day or two before, so I'm still sore. So I go down there, and it's really him wanting to know how long this has been going on behind his back, I guess, so to speak, without his knowledge. And I'm just like, man, we just kicked it off, about a couple weeks ago. I was like, I haven't talked to her. I'm playing it down. I'm dumbing it down because I don't want to piss him off and send him back over there to where not only my wife is, but my son and my daughter are. And so for about the first 30 minutes, it was a little bit back and forth, but then it kind of leveled off. And he's just like, man, screw it is what it is. And we just wound up being up like 3 dudes in a garage, just talking, shooting the shit. They were talking about their military careers. He was former Army. My buddy was former Coast Guard. I wasn't military, so I didn't really have anything to contribute to that. But we were all talking. We were talking about our kids because he had kids of his own. I had kids of mine. My buddy had kids. And at this point, it's like 3:30. And the guy whose house we're at, he's like, man, I'm fixing to shut it down. And he was like, are you staying here? He was talking to Liam. And Liam was like, I guess. And he's like, well, he said, I might just have Chip run me home. And he asked me, my buddy let me, he said, you cool with that? I said, yeah, I'm cool with that. Because we didn't been like an hour at this point. Nothing's gotten out of hand. Nothing's gotten physical, confrontational. And so we go outside. My buddy shuts his garage. I wave by. We get in the car. And he's like, if I go home, we're just going to keep fighting. And I was like, you ain't got to tell me, boy. I've done that for a long time because we were together. We met in 2004, the beginning, or 2003, beginning of 2004. This is now 2017. Or 2018, excuse me, at this point. So we had been together a long time. So I knew probably what he was going to go back into, and I was sympathetic to it. I really was. And so he's like, do you care if we just go to your house? And he's like, we'll hang out for a little bit, let her go to sleep, and then you can run me home. I was a little hesitant when he said that, but at the same time, I knew that things had been going good. It wasn't like anything back and forth, and I'm only a few houses down. So we pull out, we go back to my house. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And as we pull in my driveway, he starts to tell me this story. He holds up his wrist, and he shows me this bracelet that he's wearing. And he's like, do you know why I wear this bracelet? And I was like, brother, I don't know nothing about you. Like, I know your name and that's it. And I was like, and that you got kids. And he proceeds to tell me this story about somebody he's in service with that, died in combat, and he was trying to hold his head together. The Army said he didn't do something right. And so that's why he was kicked out of the Army. And I'm just like, damn, that's terrible. And as he's telling me this, he starts crying. Like I see tears rolling down his face, sitting in my car in my driveway. So I'm thinking the dude's getting the boot. He's obviously got a lot of shit on his mind. He's upset about this. I really thought that he just kind of needed somebody to talk to. I really did. So we go in the house, and we're in my house for probably an hour and a half. We've got records to where like the back door open when I was letting my dog out, the front door open when he went outside to smoke because I didn't smoke in my house, so he was going outside to smoke. So it's back and forth for an hour. You could see the alarm chimes going off. Long story short, we're talking about different things. We get on the subject of tattoos. And he was like, has one of your son's friends' moms ever said anything to you about tattoos? And I'm like, no, I'm covered in them. And I kind of moved down my shirt to show him this one. And if you can see it right here, I've got an open heart surgery scar right there. I had open heart surgery in 2001. So he sees that, and he picks up my shirt from the bottom and like lifts it up where you can see the whole scar. Now at this point, Ian, he had to see the gun. It was on my hip. It wasn't like, there was no way you couldn't see it.
Oh, you had a gun on you.
Yeah, I had a gun, but I always had a gun on me. And I want to reiterate that because that's what a lot of people say. Oh, well, you happen to have a gun on you. I was a CWP holder. I was a licensed CWP holder. Always owned guns. From 18, I owned guns, 21 handguns, probably had about 10 or so guns. And the gun that I had on me was the gun that I used for carry. I had been pulled over with that gun, and the gun's numbers ran.
Why did you like to have a gun on you?
I would always rather need it and not have it than, reverse that. I would always like to have it and not need it than to need one and not have one.
What inspired you to get it? Was it seeing crime on TV, or was it seeing movies growing up? Like, what made it so you felt protected by having that gun on you?
I mean, a little bit of everything, just the landscape, crime on TV, documentaries. Anytime I've ever heard of somebody talking about an experience where there was a robbery or somebody was breaking into their house, the first thing they say was, I grabbed my gun. So it was kind of like, especially in the South, it was kind of like a rite of passage. You don't have too many people in the South that didn't have guns. I remember staying at a friend of mine's house. They had some issues where some people were racing on their streets. And like the guy went out and said something to him, was like, look, I don't care what you do, just don't do it here because I'm scared you're going to come through, hit my trailer, And they kept doing it. And then he goes out again and one of them fired, but they fired up in the air. So he immediately goes back in, gets his gun and starts firing. I don't think he was firing at him, but he was definitely firing like above the car. And I just remember saying like, damn, like had he not had that gun, what if they would have went from firing in the air to firing in the trailer? So guns thwart a lot of stuff that could go wrong for you. Now, granted, you have to use them in the right way. That's why if you take these training classes, they train you in, okay, this is a situation where you can use one. And then here's the situations where you don't.
So were you trained fully with that gun?
Yeah. That was the gun that I used when I went and got the CWP. When you take the class, they bring you in, you have like a target. You get 50 rounds. You got to hit like a certain percentage inside the little outline of the body or whatever. It's like a head and, a torso area. If you're outside of that, if you miss too many, then they won't let you get your qualifications. After you pass that part, then there's like a whole list of questions and a class you have to do. So it's not like a little short thing where you just go pay some money and they print you out an ID. It's more in depth than that. And then you have your background and everything checked out. And like I said, you didn't necessarily need that for shotguns, but when it comes to handguns and you having your CWP, then you needed all that. And there's even more specifics as far as like what states will accept other ones. So like if I got my gun from South Carolina, CWP, I'm good. But if I cross over into Georgia or, North Carolina, their laws might be different. So you have to make sure that your CWP will be qualified in the other state. I think reciprocity, is the name of it. But I didn't really do too much traveling back in those days. I was mostly working, so I never had to worry about that. But again, like I said, I always had my gun on me.
So he sees this gun on you. Or whatever happens, he lifts up your shirt. What happens next?
If he did, he didn't say anything. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how he didn't. It's obviously there. And so he's like, man, what happened there? And I said, I had an open heart surgery in 2001, missed most of my senior year. I said, but I got a lot of sympathy loving off of it. I'm cracking jokes. And he's just like, man, bring it in. And you know how when people, especially if they've ever had a drink or two, they'll bear hug you and pick you up. So he did that and immediately put me down. So I thought it was a little odd, but at the time I'm thinking, well, maybe that's just what he does. I didn't know the guy. And so he's like, where's your bathroom? And I point him to where the bathroom is. Now, this time I hadn't communicated with my wife in hours. Like the last time I talked to her, I told her I was going to Jamie's and we were going to talk. That was at like probably 1 o'clock, 12:30, 1 o'clock. It's now close to 6 in the morning. So I bust out my phone real quick. I'm just like, hey, everything's good. We're at my house. So, of course, her first text was like, your house? What the hell? And I'm just like, we're good. Everything's good. So he comes out of the kitchen. I'm standing with my back up to the stove, and he doesn't say a word. He walks straight up, boom. Left hand up under my neck, jacks me up off the floor. I'm up on the stove. Because, he was a pretty big, strong dude. And I'm just like, what the fuck? And he's like, he looks me dead in the eyes. And he says, I'm going to fucking kill you. And you've heard that phrase to where people say they had that look in their eye. This dude's eyes look gray. I couldn't tell you what color they were right now if you paid me $1 million. And I remember I'd never seen eyes look like color. And I was able to scoop my way down off the stove because it was like a flat top stove. So I was able to slide off. He tries to bring his knee up to knee me in the side as best I could. I kind of twisted my body that way he didn't really knee me in the side. And I told him, I was like, dude, if you don't get the fuck off me, I'm going to shoot you. And so he cocks his hand back and he's bringing it forward. I can see it coming. And I kind of lift up my chin and he clips the bottom of my chin. He doesn't get a full shot on my face. He's aiming for the side of my jaw to try to knock me out. And when I lifted up, he clipped the chin and his momentum carried him, across the hand that he was holding me with. So he let go, and he kind of stumbles like a step or two to the left. Well, I step back. The way my kitchen is designed, I'm in a corner because you have the refrigerator, then it cuts down, you have the stove, then it cuts back the other way, and you got the sink. I'm in that corner. He's already heading back to me. He's going to football tackle me or whatever he's going to do. He's charging. So I take out the gun and I fire. Boom, boom, boom. I thought it was twice because it was loud. It was in a confined kitchen, and it was loud as shit. He immediately falls back. Boom, just dropped. Didn't say a word, just fell back. And so I'm just like, I've shot obviously before, but never shot anybody, especially in like this. It's just been target practice or just randomly shooting in the woods before now. And so I'm just like trying to figure out what's going on, what my next move is. I look, I see my phone, I call 911. Now he's making sounds at this point. He never said words after that. He's just making sounds.
Is there blood? Like when you shoot someone, is it like the movies where there's blood everywhere? What's it look like?
In my case, it wasn't. Now, a lot of that has to do with where you shoot them, the magazine or the rounds you're using, the type of weapon. All those things play a factor. My situation, I had a Smith & Wesson 9mm. The rounds were full metal jacket rounds, so they weren't like hollow points. They were target rounds, basically, is what they were. So all of them were through and through. One of them didn't go through. All of them were in the center mass area, which is where they train you to shoot, center mass. Because people will say, well, why didn't you try to shoot him in the leg? And I've heard people say that to police officers. Why not shoot him in the leg? Odds are, unless you're like a really good marksman, if you try to shoot somebody in the leg, especially if you're under, stress, you're probably going to miss.
And this happened fast. Like you didn't have 5 minutes to plan.
Oh, no.
This is quick. Like describe that feeling of like that flight or fight adrenaline. Like you probably froze up and you just have to go.
Yeah, I definitely. As soon as he, puts his arm around arm around my throat or a hand around my throat, and says that, I mean, like I can see in his eyes, he's not kidding. Like I knew he wasn't joking. Then when you say I'm going to kill you, like, as men, we have this, bravado. And you might text somebody something, whatever, talk a little trash. Even in person, you might say something to somebody. But when you put hands on another man, like that's another level. That's, all bets are off. And again, like I said, I didn't know this guy. So I've got to take him at his word. You look me in my eye and tell me you're going to kill me and you already got your hands on me. I got to take you at your word. So it's either me or you, and I was going to do everything I could while I was standing in that kitchen to make sure it wasn't me that wasn't going to walk out.
Was there an opportunity to fire one less bullet, or it just happened too quick where your finger's on the trigger?
It happened too quick because I thought it was only two. When I made the 911 call, I thought it was only two. Because to answer your question earlier, you said, is it like what it was in the movies? No, there wasn't like a blood splatter out back or nothing like that. Now, had I hit him in the head, I'm sure there would have been a lot more mess than what it was, but everything was center mass. So when he falls straight back, I pick up the phone. When I call 911, that's exactly what I tell him. I said, Hash, got a guy. And this is a key point. I said friend in the 911 call because I didn't know what else to say. I didn't have time to explain the whole situation. So in the 911 call, I had a friend of mine in my house. We were getting along. He flipped on me, tried to attack me, said he was going to kill me. I had to shoot him. I shot him twice in the chest. And that's verbatim. I'm not saying that's word for word, but that's verbatim of what happened. And I can get you a copy of the 911 call. But that friend of mine came up so much after that. Well, why did he shoot his friend? He wasn't my friend. I just didn't really want to be like, okay, well, let me tell you this whole story. I wanted him to get somebody there and try to help him. I didn't want to kill him. I didn't know at that point that I had. I knew he was still alive because he was making noises. And so she starts directing me on what to do. She's like, can you see where his entrance wounds are? So I pull up his shirt. I see two of them, which is another reason why I only thought there was two. She said, can you get a towel, put it over it? So I run down to my bathroom, the bathroom he had just come out of, jerk the towel, go back, put it over there. And that's really about all I could do. Like I didn't know how to do CPR or anything like that. She's asking me to ask questions. He's not responsive. He's only making noises. What I've heard from other people now is what was called the death rattle, just kind of like sounds as the body's slowly dying off and everything's shutting down. And she's like, the 911 ambulance is on the way. And also they had notified the authorities that the authorities were on the way. And she's like, where's the gun? I was like, the gun's on the counter. And she's like, well, can you please have it unloaded, laying on the counter? And I'm like, yeah. So I step up, unload the gun, leave it on the counter. And finally, the first arriving officer comes, and she's like, I need you to go out with your hands up. So I'm on the phone. I go out, hands up. He cuffs me, and he's like, you're not under arrest. We just got to see what's going on, survey the situation. I'm like, okay. So he passes me off to the second officer that pulls up. This is a female. So she puts me in the back of the car, and I'm just sitting there. Mine is still spinning at what's going on. They didn't take my phone from me at this time. So I was able to kind of twist back, get my phone out, and I text my wife. I'm like, hey, we started fighting. I shot him. And I couldn't even tell what she texted me back. One of the female officers seen me, so she seen me on my phone. She grabbed my phone from me. And so I didn't know if she got it or, what the situation was. But by now it's like 6:45, 7 in the morning. Got 2 cop cars here. Then the ambulance pulls up. And then it's just one right after the other. Cop car, SUV, cop car. And they're lining the street. And I live in a neighborhood to where it's like a house every 5 feet. You only got 5 feet of yard, then it's another house. Real cookie cutter neighborhood. So people are starting to get up Sunday morning for church. This is all a Saturday night. Everybody's looking. They see me in the back of the cop car. My neighbor comes out. She's asking what's going on. Am I good? Or the kids in the house? And I'm just like trying to talk to her through the glass. And the female cop comes back over. I did see the ambulance pull up. I see him put him in the ambulance, and they drive off. So I don't know at this point. I don't know if he's alive, if he's dead, what the situation is. The female cop comes back over, and she reads me my rights. And, obviously you've had that done yourself. She asked me if I want to answer any questions, and I tell them no. And that was it. It was shut down. So at that point, I'm thinking I'm going to jail. I'm in that car another 2 hours.
Just in your driveway?
Yeah, just sitting right in my driveway.
How are you feeling? Like, is your heart beating?
Oh, out my damn chest. I didn't know what was going on. And I'm like, a part of me is thinking I'm not in trouble because I was in my house. It was my gun. Like, he attacked me. He said he was going to kill me. I'm thinking I acted in self-defense, so I'm good. But it's still the experience of it all. Adrenaline pumping, heart still beating like crazy. And I'm just sitting in there, and all these cops are walking around the yard, and they're talking, and I see them pointing to here, pointing there. I don't know what they're saying, so that's driving me crazy. I'm like, I want to, start trying to help them figure out exactly what happened because I don't know what they know. I did see at some point my wife pulled up, so she's talking to them. So they're still conversating. And then finally, I've been in this car like 2.5, 3 hours. I'm not sure what the time was, but I had to use the bathroom. And so I kind of nodded to one of the cops to come over, and I was like, man, I got to use the bathroom. And he's like, you got to hold it. I'm like, brother, there ain't no holding. Like, I'm either going to go in this car or I can go in the yard or whatever, but I got to use the bathroom. And he's like, is this your house? I said, yes, this is my house. I live here. So he lets me in the house. And I go use the bathroom, and he said, where's somewhere you can change and into some different clothes? And I said, upstairs. My bedroom's upstairs. So I go up. We change clothes, give them everything that I had on. I think they took everything but my underwear, and they bagged it up. Then I put on new clothes. We walked outside. So I'm thinking I'm still going to jail because they had read me my rights. So we get outside, and this one detective is a male. He comes up and he's like, is there somewhere you can go while we finish our investigation? And I'm like, well, yeah, I can probably go to one of my buddies around the corner or something. Not that I was voluntarily wanting to go to jail, but it was just kind of, it caught me off guard. And so by then, my mom's been notified. She lived like 2 hours away. She's there. And so I was just like, yeah, I'll be at 222, whatever the street name was. Come find me when you need me. That's where I'll be. And so at this point now, the pressure's kind of off. I think I'm good because I'm like, if they wanted to take me in, they'd have done it. So I'm over there telling him what's going on. The whole neighborhood's starting to find out at this point with Facebook and everything else. The word's traveling. And I'm over there probably like an hour and a half. My mom's, with me. She's obviously upset knowing that everything has just happened. And then the SUV comes pulling up. I go up to the SUV, and he's like, we're done what we got to do over there. He said, when can you come in and talk to us? And I said, well, I'm not coming in without a lawyer. And he was like, well, who you got as a lawyer? And at the time, it was the guy that I was using for my divorce attorney. And he's like, well, we know him. We'll set up a meet, and we'll go from there. And I'm like, all right, so I'm good to go back home. And he said, yeah. I was like, well, is there any mess, anything that's got to be cleaned up? And he said, I don't think so. He said, but that's on you anyway, so we don't do that. And I'm just like, all right. And apparently that's true. I guess the cops don't have any duty to clean up anything. Wow. So whether it's a suicide or whatever the case may be, the mess is solely on the homeowner to get cleaned up. Depending on the severity, that's when you would call like a high-tech cleaning crew to come out there and do it. So we go back home. I come in the kitchen, and this is kind of to go to your question earlier again. There's like some very small amount of smudged blood on the floor. Like my mom got it up with 2 paper towels, and that was it. The only other thing wrong was one of the bullets went and struck my refrigerator door and ricocheted to the wall. Other than that, that was pretty much it. You couldn't tell nothing had happened in the house. So I'm wrapping my mind around everything. Didn't sleep that whole first night. Didn't really sleep much the second night. Monday morning, I go meet my lawyer. I basically tell him everything that happened. He writes a statement. Then later on, he called me. He said, hey, our statement answered all their questions, so we should be good to go. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm thinking we're done. I'm out of work at this point because of the back surgery that I've had. Work's obviously heard. So I call them. I'm like, hey, I know you probably heard. I'm still planning on coming back next week. Just letting you know everything's good. I was like, yeah, well, I'm glad you're okay. We'll see you next week.
Now, at this point, do you know the guy died?
Yes, I found out later on that first day that he did pass away. Apparently, when he got to the hospital, the word was once he arrived, he had a 0.1 chance of living, and that didn't come through, and he died at the hospital not long after he arrived.
How'd that make you feel when you heard that news?
It was another layer of just like me getting hit with a brick, like because I didn't want to kill that man. And to this day, what I look at this situation as is I had to survive someone killing me that was trying to kill me. I can only imagine what somebody that hits somebody with a car thinks, that's driving drunk or something like that, because that person didn't have a choice. They made a bad choice. They hit somebody and they killed them. My situation was different because this guy was threatening to kill me and I had to defend myself. So that's what I've kind of lined my mind to wrap around is I didn't kill a man that, was an innocent man. You know what I'm saying? He was trying to do harm to me, so I had to do what I had to do.
And he was in your own home.
Yeah, in my own home. And like I said, again, he didn't say, I'm going to beat your ass. He didn't say, I'm going to, F you up. He said, I'm going to kill you. Like, that's a very specific word.
Now, when you think about it, looking back on it now, do you focus on, well, if I never tried to reconcile with my wife, I wouldn't be here? Or do you focus on, if I never invited him into my home, I wouldn't be here? Because one kind of triggered the other, and it, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm. The reconciliation, I think, was probably going to happen. I mean, look, how many people do we know that break up and get back together? I mean, Jennifer Lopez just got back together with Ben Affleck. When she broke up with A-Rod, A-Rod didn't try to go beat down Ben's door with a baseball bat. You know what I'm saying? That happens all the time. So I think as an adult, especially if you're getting into a relationship knowing that someone was on the rebound, a part of you has to expect that they might want to go back to that person. Now, sometimes they don't, but that's just part of being an adult. I've been the guy, before me and my wife, I've been that rebound guy. And then when they wanted to go back, I understood it was all cool. Everybody, I think, needed a break in this situation.
It sucks to be the rebound guy, though.
Yeah, it does suck. It does suck.
But it's hard to compete with the person that has history, too.
Yeah, you can. And me and her, we had children together, happy times, great times, moved down there. Her father passed. I mean, we had so much history that, like you said, it's hard to go against that. And as far as the inviting him back, I didn't invite him. He invited himself. I went along with it, but I felt like it was better to do that and defuse the whole situation than to send him back over there where at that point, I don't know what could have happened because I wasn't going over there with him. And he's in there with my wife. He's obviously not in a great headspace. And he's also in there with my 2 kids.
And there was alcohol involved.
Yes. He had been drinking previously to that night. As to how much I wasn't privy to. Once we got to my buddy's house earlier that night, he drank a couple of beers. And then when we were at my house, we each done 2 shots apiece.
And how long were him and your wife together for? It wasn't that long, right?
No, they met in October of 2017, and this was April of 2018 when everything happened.
So not long.
Yeah, not like a handful of months. They probably met a little bit before then, but by the time they were actually going to move in together, they moved in together November the 1st of 2017. So they probably met each other. It had to be between July and November.
What's that first conversation with your wife like after this incident?
I mean, well, obviously she's asking me what happened. And, she's doing the same thing you are. She's like, what if we hadn't have done this or what if we hadn't have done that? And I'm just like, look, if that was what was on his mind was he wasn't going to be satisfied with the resolution, like he would have done it regardless. He could have done it when maybe I wasn't paying attention. He could have got the drop on me somewhere. He could have done something to you. How many times have we read in the paper where a man, got dumped and then he went and just killed the woman and possibly kids or whatever else. So another thing about this guy is because of that issue I told you with his buddy, he was kicked out of the Army and was diagnosed with PTSD. He was on a lot of prescription medications, including Prozac and other things. So not only was he on prescription medications, he was also drinking. He was also on a cycle of steroids. That night at their home, before he roughed her up, he actually shot and injected himself with steroids. The cops collected that from the trash can at their home. Now, they didn't want to admit that it was steroids. It come out later after SLED, South Carolina law enforcement, come back and brought it, gave the report of what it was. So they knew right off the bat that they had a guy that was, just gotten broken up with. He was on prescription pills because there was a lot. I'm talking, there must have been 20 bottles of pills with his name on it. And he was drinking, and he was on steroids, and he's getting a boot. So the evidence was kind of there of who had the issue.
Did you have any anger towards him, though, because he attacked your wife?
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know he attacked her until later.
You didn't know this was all afterwards?
Yeah,
okay.
I didn't find out that he attacked her until after, when I started telling her what happened, she said, well, he attacked me earlier in the night.
If you had known beforehand that he attacked her, would you have went to that house, your friend's house, for that meeting?
No.
Would you have called the cops, or what would you have done?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely called the cops. But she didn't tell me because she knew that I would have either called the cops or maybe had been mad enough to go down there and, say something. But she also knew that I wasn't in the physical condition to do anything about it either. So she wasn't going to say anything. I think the way she looked at it is if he just left and then we were going to, get back together, then it was better that way. He could go his own way. We could go ours. But I don't think that was on his agenda.
So a couple days go by and you think everything's in the clear. Everything's like the storm settled.
Yeah. We're looking at probably Wednesday of that week.
Like 4 days after.
Yeah. Sunday morning was the shooting. I go Monday, answer the questions, Tuesday, Wednesday. So you have it roughly, 3 to 4 days after. My lawyer calls me around 4:00. I see his name pop up, answer the phone. I'm like, hey, what's up, buddy? He's like, I got bad news. That's not ever something you want to hear come from your lawyer.
Never.
Especially not in this case. And he's like, they're charging you with murder. And I'm like, why? And he was like, I don't know. He's like, everything in your statement, you laid it out. It makes sense. He was like, the only thing I can try to see is that they're trying to paint this as like a love triangle and you was killing him to get your wife back. And I'm like, but we were getting back together anyway. Like, there was no need for that. Like, I can see if this had happened right after they met. And I was upset. I was like, they've been together for months. And he's like, they didn't give me a reason why. They just said they're charging. He said, you got to turn yourself in tomorrow at 7 o'clock or 12 o'clock at Hill Finkley Detention Center. And I'm just like, all right, I have to call you back. And so I hung up with him and I called some friends and told them what was going on. And I was like, who do I need to call? Who's the best lawyer? And everybody come back with the same answer. Andy Savage, Andy Savage, Andy Savage. I mean, I asked people from all walks of life. People from other states were telling me to call Andy Savage.
Anyone with the last name Savage sounds like a great lawyer.
Exactly. And so I knew Andy. He had been in the news because he represented, do you remember the Walter Scott shooting to where the guy was running away and the cop shot him in the back a good number of times? So Andy was Slager's attorney. Slager was the cops.
Okay.
And he got him off of the state charges. Then the federal come and picked it up. I know that video looks horrible, but if you block out that video and actually listen to the case, they made a very good case. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that. That's a whole nother show. But they made a very good case. But the state come in, they got him off the state. The feds come in, they picked it up. He did wind up going to prison. He's in somewhere in Colorado, but he's at like a cop prison. He's not in the worst place.
Isn't it crazy how you could be found not guilty of the state and then the feds could find something just to get you?
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. And you had people that like racial tensions were high because the cop was white and the guy was black. So that played a big factor in it. There was people outside. There was protests. There was a lot going on during that time. And so there was a lot of media coverage on it. So that's the only reason why I knew who Andy was. Other than that, I never needed a lawyer. I didn't know anything about him. And I call a secretary that night. This is after hours by the time I started finding out who to call. I leave a message, and she calls me back. And she's like, hey, what's the situation? So I kind of briefly run through, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be turning myself into jail tomorrow at 12 o'clock. And she's like, I just talked to Andy. He said be there at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I'm like, all right, I'll be there. So my mom, my wife, and me went there 7 o'clock in the morning. We were there. I run down the story, and he looks at me, and he kind of throws his hands up, and he's like, so why are we here? I'm like, your guess is as good as mine, boy. I don't know. And he's like, it sounds like you done what anybody would have if somebody was threatening to kill them and put hands on them in their house. I was like, that's what I'm thinking. And he was like, is somebody running for re-election down there in Berkeley County? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. Only thing I know is I'm supposed to go turn myself in at 12 o'clock. And this is the kind of stroke this guy had. He looks at me and he says, nah. He goes out of the room. He makes a phone call. He comes back. He's like, your surrender got pushed to Friday. He's like, it'll probably get pushed till Monday, but I wanted Friday just to be sure we had some time. And I'm like, well, so in my mind, that's just a couple days I don't have to be in jail, so I'm ecstatic. And I'm like, all right, cool. So we sit there that whole day and we break out everything. Like we tell him story after story. My wife's telling him where she met him, all of that. As we're telling stuff for me and she's telling stuff on him, they're printing out stuff. It was like something out of a movie. Like his whole team's working. They're getting records for this, records for that. Oh, I got him. He was here, here, here. He lived here. You know, he's fired from this. I mean, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I'd never been involved in anything like this. And I'm just, my head spinning. Well, then we get to the point to where they talk about how much this is going to cost. And I understood why, you know, all this was as efficient as it was. Because at the end, he goes, well, let's talk about payment. And he's like, it's $50,000 for me to take the case. And he's like, I'll need another $15,000 to go ahead and start the retainers to do, you know, investigations, my investigations, you know, do interviews with people involved, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm looking at like, you know, $65,000 right off the rip. And I didn't have that kind of cash on hand, not at that time. So my wife, man, bossed up. I mean, 2 credit cards, bam, she done like, you know, $40,000, $20,000 on 2 cards.
You could just pay the lawyer with a credit card?
You could pay the lawyer with a credit card, yeah.
Wow.
And so she done that. My mom done the other piece of it, and we paid him in full right there. So we was like, you know, we don't want to have to worry about paying you later on or doing payments. Like, it's paid in full. Let's just get this going. And so I'm still, this is 2 or 3 days after the fact. Now I know I got to turn myself in on Friday. By the time I get home, he calls me and he's like, hey, I got the surrender pushed back till Sunday at 1 o'clock. Enjoy your weekend. We'll try to get you out of there. And he told me before I left, he's like, I typically like for my clients to sit in jail for a little while. And I kind of look at him and I'm, and he's like, reason being, he's like, it's hot. It's in the news. Everybody's looking. He's like, but in your case, it's a little different. He's like, I think I'm going to go ahead and try to get a bond for you ASAP. Now, a bond for murder has to be seen by the circuit court. A magistrate can't give you a bond for that. Luckily, circuit court was in the county that I was in that week. Had we missed it, I would have had no choice but to sit in there until the circuit court rolled back around and bounced from county to county. So he was like, we're going to have a bond hearing Monday morning. You're going to go in on Sunday. Your bond hearing is going to be Monday morning. I'm like, well, you can't ask for a better scenario than that.
You know what's crazy? They let you self-surrender on a murder charge. First-time offender. I'm a first-time offender for fraud, and they damn near kicked my door in with every federal agency armed, hauling me out in handcuffs.
And I've heard stories like that. I don't get it. I'm like, I even had a buddy who was like, let me get this straight. He's like, they're going to charge you for murder, but just to tell you, hey, take the weekend, come by Sunday evening.
So nonchalant about it.
Yeah.
I've never heard anything like this.
I haven't either at the time. Obviously, I'd not had any personal experience, but anybody that I knew that had done something wrong, I'm like you. They got, their door kicked in or, house raided or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I just assumed this was normal. And I'm finding out the more and more I talk to people, it's definitely not normal, the way it was operating. So my family gets together, and I don't want to use the term party, but like everybody was together. We all cooked out Saturday night.
So it's a party.
Yeah, maybe. But like we're hoping for the best because I don't know if I'm going to get bond, because if they deny it, I'm in there for God knows how long. So there's a chance.
Trial,
there's a chance I don't come out, and we're aware of that. So everybody comes down, eat. Sunday morning, we go get in the car, and it was like that scene from Ray Liotta and Goodfellas where he's going to jail. He gets in the car, and he tells the drivers, like, take me to jail. I had to tell my mom, I'm like, all right, take me to jail. And so me and her in the back seat, me and my wife's in the back seat. Mom drives us. They drop me off. And here's like the prison aspect of it, or jail aspect, excuse me. We go in there, and I've never been in before, so I don't know what to do. Only thing I know of what I've seen on TV, don't talk. If you don't got to, just keep your mouth shut. So I go in there, I sit on the bench, and there's this biker in there. And you can just tell he's in there for DUI. He's slurring his words. And he looks at me, and he's like, bench of shame, huh? And I'm just like, yeah, I guess you could say that. Still not wanting to talk a whole lot. We go to the holding. Go in. He's still he sits right beside me. Yep, talking the whole time. I was like, all right, well, at least this is making the time pass. I knew I was going to be called to the magistrate, but I also knew there wasn't nothing they were going to be able to do. It was just a formality. So they called me, him, and this other young kid that had gotten busted for like a weed charge. We come out, they handcuff us. Wrist to wrist, wrist to ankle, all a little shimmy our way down the hall, sit on the bench. They do the kid first. He's like, all right, you got simple possession, PR bond. Next guy, you got a DUI second offense, whatever his bond was. My last name's Williamson, so obviously I'm going to be last at anything. We can go in alphabetically. And he's like, you're charged with murder and possession of weapon during a violent crime. You can't be seen by me. You have to see the circuit court. And after he says that, that guy that's sitting on that bench kind of like looks up at me like, what the fuck? And we go back to the room. He picks up his stuff and just moves to the other side of the room. Don't talk to me no more the rest of the time we're in there. So in a way, that kind of worked out. I know that I'm getting bond court that Monday, so I'm just trying to make it through that night and just focus on like having a good bond hearing. Can't sleep in there. The lights don't turn off. It's holding, so every time somebody new comes in, they pile them there on top of you. Like, I want to say like at 5:30 in the morning, like 8 guys come in. They were all together. All of them were drunk, and I think they were Spanish because they were speaking Spanish, and they were loud. So, it was just impossible to sleep, plus all the other stuff that you got weighing on your mind. So I got no sleep that first night. The next day, bond court was at like 9, so they come get me, and the walk is like you're walking like underground hooked to the courtroom where the courtroom is. That was the most intimidating walk I'd ever took in my life. It looked like I was walking into like a castle or something. Like it's those big stone block walls that are just real intimidating, and it's like you're going over a slight hump, going back down, and it was just like from the rip, I was just like, oh, God. And we go into this room, and there's probably like 6 guys in there. Now, I'm still in my street clothes of what I got arrested in. All these guys are in jumps, like orange, green, blue, depending on where they're at. And I sit down, and I'm listening to guys like saying how when they get to where they're going, they're going to try to kill so-and-so. And one guy saying he's going to go to Atlanta. They think he's going to testify against somebody, but he's just going because Atlanta's got better food. It's all these stories. One guy's like saying he's got to see the judge because he set his sister on fire. And I'm just sitting over there like, oh my God, like where the hell am I at? And I'm not saying a word, letting everybody do their talking. And one guy asked me, he was like, you here for family court? And I said something like that. And the other guy's like, nah, you're from Cane Bay. And I kind of cut my eyes. That's the neighborhood that I live in. I kind of cut my eyes. And he's like, we got the news in here. We see what's going on. And I was like, all right. And he's like, you got a lawyer? And I said, yeah, I got a lawyer. And he's like, good. He's like, don't use no public defender, not for what you in there for. And I was like, no, sir. And that was it. And so I wait my turn. I go in. They bring me in. This was the biggest courtroom I'd ever seen in my life, like huge flags on each side. Judge is like way up there at the top. I mean, it was massively intimidating. And we go in, and obviously the state is trying to say why I'm a danger to the community. I need to be locked up. I don't need to be let out. I'm this, I'm that. I'm a murderer, yada, yada, yada. My lawyer's obviously doing everything to combat that. They do their thing. And any trial that I'd ever seen for a bond hearing, the judge makes a motion right there. Bond granted, bond denied. She bangs her gavel down and she says, I'll make my decision and let you know. Next case. And I'm standing there. I'm cuffed up. I looked at my lawyer and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And he's like, I guess that means she'll let us know. And they're taking me back already, back to the room. And the guard is with me, and I'm like, so what does that mean she'll let me know? I was like, how long does that usually take? He's like, I should probably have a decision in a week or so. I'm like, a week or so? Like, shit. And we go in there, and I don't know what to think. Like, I didn't even talk about it to anybody, but I don't know what to think because I'm just usually used to being a resolution right off the bat. And so we go back to the holding. I'm in there probably about an hour, so I'm like, all right, somebody's got to know something by now. I'll call my wife. She's like, hey, you got bond.
Right
so
away.
They already knew it. I don't know why she didn't say it, but they already knew it. And she's like, but you're probably not going to get out till tomorrow because of the paperwork's got a process. I'm like, as long as I'm getting out, I'm good. I can do another night if I got to do another night. Mind you, I think I'm doing another night in holding. One of the guys that was in there had come back in from setting his sister on fire and was like ecstatic that he only got 15 years because he was facing like 30. So he was super happy he only got 15 years. And they were all going back to like regular pods. So I go back to holding, and there's still guys that are getting released throughout the night on up until like 8, 9 o'clock at night. I've not got my hopes up because my wife said it would probably be tomorrow, but a little bit of me's like, maybe they'll get it done. Maybe I'll get out of here tonight. Probably like 10 o'clock, the door comes open. It's like, Williamson. I'm like, fuck. I sprung off that bunk, like down, almost jumped, slam out the door. And the cop's like, he kind of looks at me for a minute, and he's like, you're Leah's dad, ain't you? Leah's my stepdaughter. And I said, yeah. And he's like, my wife taught her gymnastics. And I'm just like, well, hi. And he's like, we're transferring you to a pod. And I'm like, looking at him, I'm like, I'm supposed to be getting out of here in the morning, dude. And he's like, yeah, you might be. He's like, but it's just protocol. Once so many people come in, you got to get transferred out. So I'm like, all right, well, whatever. I guess you tell me what to do. So they take me, they give me my jumpsuit. They give you a little cup and your 3-in-1 body wash, shampoo, toothbrush, toilet paper, the whole 9 yards, shower shoes, and they sent me to the pod. So it's like 2 big pods stacked on top of each other, just open rooms, beds on each side. I didn't know where to go, which one to do. I just went to the top, was trying to find an open bottom bunk. Of course, that's not going to happen.
Oh, they don't assign beds? They just go wherever.
Yeah. You went the first room you went in was like a big open room with those huge round plastic chairs and then a TV. And then you had a room at the bottom and then a stairwell onto the top that went to a room at the top. And it's just beds on both sides. The middle's open. You just find somewhere. They didn't tell me where to go. So I walk all the way to the end. All the bottom ones are full. I'm coming back, and I see the guy that had set his sister on fire. And he's laying there, and he kind of just, nods and throws his finger up. And I'm like, hey, I guess I'll choose this guy. And I said, you care if I get the top bunk? He's like, nah, go ahead. So I climb up there, and I'm just kind of, now it's like a whole different environment to take in as opposed to the holding. And some guy comes up immediately, and I'm just like, oh, shit. And he's like, do you need a job? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. And he's like, so you getting bond? I'm like, yeah, I'm getting out tomorrow. And he's like, all right, well, I ain't gonna worry about putting you on no job. I didn't even know what he meant. I was just like, nah, I don't need that. And so I'm listening to all these guys talk. And surprisingly, the conversation was not what you would think. Like they were trying to tell this one kid like he needed to do better. He had a lot of talent. So when he got out, he needed to focus on this. Other guys are saying, all right, with our records, we got to do something like, open up a landscaping business that we can do where it don't matter if we have there was a lot of positive talk of those guys trying to reinforce one another to do better when they get out. Just some of the things that I seen, like some of the vents that were like, it's cold in there. I'm sure you know, it's very cold. And they were wetting like napkins and paper towels and then throwing it up to the top.
We used to do that so it would stop.
Yeah, it would stop the airflow. Yeah, so they were doing that. You had a guy that had a bag, Ziploc bag with water in it, and then he put that into a pillowcase. He was using that as like a dumbbell. And I'm just sitting up there on the top. I'm taking all this in. Finally, one of the guys looks at me and he's like, you got some nice ink. And I'm like, thanks. And he's like, did you get it done around here? I said, yeah. He asked me my artist name. Like 9 guys in there knew who my tattoo artist was. So that was kind of like an introduction into the conversation, I guess, without me having to put myself in it. And we talked for a little bit and everything was cool. And I finally decided I wasn't going to take a shower. I was just like, yeah, I'm not going in there. I don't really know what's up with that. I'm going to just hammer it out. Well, I was like, I think I am. And so I get up to go head to the shower, and the guy's like, you know how the shower works, right? He's like, you know how to work the little piece in the back? And I'm just like, yeah. I think they all assumed I'd been in there before. Like, I don't know if
you looked the part with the tattoos.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
yeah.
say. Maybe I just looked the part because of the beard and the tats, but I had never been. So I go in there, and it's like when you press the button, it automatically starts to come back out, and it only lasts for like 10 seconds.
And it was probably cold.
Oh, cold. God, cold as hell. And the piece they were talking about, there was like a piece of plastic that you could jam in there to keep it from cutting off. That way you could just shower. I couldn't figure out how to work it. So I was taking like showers in like 6-minute increments, getting what I could. I come out. I make it through the night. Everything was good. Nobody really, said anything. It wasn't as bad as stories that I've heard. Again, I was only in, county jail. Next morning, I get bond. I get out. The dudes that come up to me when I was getting bond, they were like, man, can I have this? Can I have that? Like, they were wanting everything that I had. I didn't care. I was giving it away. But like, in a part of me when I left was like, that's such a huge deal for people in there to get an extra roll of toilet paper, an extra
collect
cup.
those extra hygiene stuff. They like that, and that's just state issued shit, and they like to have that.
Yeah, and you could tell it meant so much to them just to get that, and I was just like, well, at least they got the profit of that. I was like, y'all gonna have everything I got on, bro. I don't care.
How much was your bond?
$100,000 for the murder, $50,000 for the weapons charge.
That's it for a murder.
That's it for a murder.
And you just had to put 10% down, or how does that work?
Yeah, it was usually 10%, which would have been about $15,000. My lawyer, again, the stroke that he had, worked with a bondsman. He told him the deal, and he's like, if there's anything you can do to kind of, help him out, it'd be greatly appreciated. So it was like $12,000 to get me out, and which we come up with that, paid the $12,000. I got out. Part of the bond was I had to give up any weapons that I own. Couldn't have any weapons. Couldn't leave the state, confined to the house for house arrest.
Oh, you're on house arrest?
Yep.
The whole 5 years that you...
Whole 5 years.
Because you were fighting your case for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Ankle monitor? Or?
No, they never gave me an ankle monitor.
So you were just on house arrest for 5 years?
Yeah.
Couldn't work?
No, I could work. I could go to work. Could go to...
Did your job take you back?
No, I was going to get to that.
Okay.
Because all this kind of flowed in. Yeah. So, supposed to turn in on Wednesday, turn in on Sunday, have bond here on Monday. I get out Tuesday. I was supposed to be at work Monday morning. So I get out. That's the first thing I'm concerned about is like, all right, well, I know I got all this money I got to pay back to people. Like, let me go figure out what's going on with the job. So I called them, told them I was out. They was like, well, come in tomorrow at, Wednesday, I think it is, come at 9 a.m. When they told me that, I was kind of like, uh-oh, because I'm supposed to be there at like 6. And so I go at 9 a.m., we go into the manager's office, and he's like, all right, we're going to go across the street to the GM's office. I'm like, well, this don't look good. So we go over there, and that's the first thing he tells me. He's like, man, I know you got a lot going on, but, unfortunately, we got to let you go. And I'm just like, what the hell? And he asked me kind of like what happened, and I give him the story, and he's like, well, I can't imagine what you're going through. And I'm like, well, imagine getting fired on top of it. Like, you ain't doing me any favors here.
What was their reasoning? Just because of what was going on?
Because of the charges. That was their reasoning.
Isn't that
because
crazy?
Of the charges.
Not found guilty yet, and they fired you.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not even in. I can see if I was going to be in jail for a year, you got to have somebody to do the job. But, like, obviously, if things go bad for me, you're not going to have to worry about firing me because I'm not coming back. Like, I'm going to die in there. They're wanting to give me life. But, yeah, just fired me because of the charges.
That's insane. How was the neighborhood looking at you?
A lot of the people that knew me, so they had my back. the people that didn't know me were obviously going off rumor mill. So the rumor mill is running rampant. Like, oh, he come home, he found a guy in bed with his wife. And I'm just like, we hadn't lived together in, 6 months. Like, that's just neighborhood chatter. And like I said, the people that knew me were cool with it because they were like, if he doesn't have a job, he's on house arrest. They were sending the kids down to hang out with me because this was like right around spring break. I had 9 kids in the house, like the week that I just got out of a murder charge. There's kids everywhere.
How does your kids feel towards you while you're going through this?
My daughter knew a lot of what was going on. She was very supportive. She understood. My son was like 6 or 7. I talked to him and gave him a brief summary of what was going on, but he never really talked about it. He was just like, he said somebody at school told him that I had shot somebody, and he said his reply was he did it in self-defense. And I'm like, well, that's what you say anytime anybody says anything to you. And to this day, he's 14 now, we hadn't really talked about it, and he hadn't asked. I just kind of left it at that, and it doesn't seem to have bothered him either. He's, a very active kid, plays football, all that good stuff. So I don't think it's affected him, at least not that I know of, or that he's let me on to know that it has. I mean,
he must listen to your interviews and research. I mean,
I'm sure he does.
This day and age, looking at the news.
Oh yeah, he was telling me not too long ago that him and his buddies were Googling their parents, and I'm just like, better watch that Googling me because you're going to come up with some articles that
Imagine all those like porn stars and OnlyFans stars and stuff when their kids start Googling them. Oh, yep. Man, it's just a whole different generation.
Yeah, the stuff that's going to come up. And that's the thing. That's what I was telling him. I was like, all right, they start Googling me, man. You might have some questions come your way. And he kind of laughed it off. But he knows now, obviously, it's over. But he never wanted to have a conversation about it. My daughter knew everything that was going on. She understood what happened that night. She understood what was going on. And she was just graduating. So when I get out, like I said, they're telling me, you can only go to a doctor, a lawyer, church, and a job. That's it. Can't leave the state, can't do nothing. Well, my daughter's fixing to graduate literally in like a month. And so I asked for permission to go to the graduation, and they's like, you can go to the graduation, but you got to come straight home. Can't go out, can't go to dinner, can't go eat or nothing like that. And so I'm at the graduation, I'm watching her walk. I can't even enjoy this graduation because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, am I going to be here to see my son graduate? I'm out. Thank God. Definitely easier to be out and try to fight your case than to be in jail and trying to fight it. So I thank the good Lord for me being out. But also it's like a huge piano just hanging over your head, not knowing what's going to happen.
It's scary, the unknown.
Yeah, the unknown. It's terrifying. And so the process then is starting to, the legal side is starting to unfold. They're going to everybody. They're getting the interviews. They're building their case. I'm sure the state was building theirs. My first point here is now I got to figure out something about a job. The good thing was that when they fired me, I had a pretty decent 401k because they were a good company as far as giving you profit sharing. So I cashed out that 401k, paid my wife back, paid my mom back, paid, I think my dad covered the bond, paid him back. So everybody that put up any money for me got their money back. Had a little bit left over, paid off my car. I think a credit card that had some money on it. So I was basically I didn't have any debt outside of my regular bills. So I was trying to slim it down to where I knew I wasn't going to be able to get a job like I had, but I could manage with another job. Luckily, I found one pretty quickly, actually. And again, never having to say, hey, I'm a felon, or hey, I have an arrest or anything to disclose anything. It got to that point, and I told the guy, I was like, man, I'm involved in something right now. And I told him the situation, and he was like, well, I used to take criminal law. He's like, doesn't sound like you got anything to worry about. He's like, I appreciate you telling me, but, we're good.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, well, it's almost awesome. And I'm like, okay, good. So I come home, tell my wife, I was like, you know what? I'm honest with the guy. I told him I still got the job. She's like, well, that's good. We're happy. I'm at least the job will get me out of that house, because being in that house was making me go crazy too. They run it through the corporate in Arizona. It comes back. They flag my charge. It's a pending charge, and they withdraw the offer.
Oh, wow.
So right there, I know, all right, I can't go to any big company that's going to run a background because it's going to be a pending murder charge. And companies tend to not look too favorably on applicants that have that on their record. So now I've got to go even kind of lower down the spectrum. And I wound up going and getting a job at a sign company as a fabricator, because I'm a welder. That's what I've done most of my life. And I start, doing that. It was great because it got me out of the house, but it was probably half of what I was making before.
Yeah.
So I've got to adjust to everything else that's going on. Now adjust the way I'm living, lifestyle. But it's easy because I can't go anywhere and do anything. So I'm boxed in to this. So my focus at that point becomes, all right, anything I can do to help the case. And so I start researching things on my own, I never listened to podcasts up until this point. I started listening to Wrongful Conviction podcasts because I'm like, do people really go to prison if they didn't do anything wrong? That answer is a resounding yes. They do. And that's kind of what started me down a rabbit hole of those types of podcasts. That led into true crime, which eventually led me to do my own podcast because I was going crazy. And as crazy as it sounds, it's therapeutic to talk to people. I was a very outgoing, talkative person. So when I started my own podcast, it gave me an outlet to be able to talk to people. Even though I was still confined to my home, it gave me an outlet to be able to talk to people. And it really, really helped me out. Now, I didn't talk about my situation, obviously, because it was ongoing, but we just would have different guests on from different walks of life. So that really helped out. The next step in the legal process, we have a preliminary hearing. So we go to the preliminary hearing. The detective on the stand lies through her teeth, like on at least 5 different occasions. Not necessarily huge lies, but is just lying one right after the other. Like she says, he came out of his house when the rising officer got there and locked himself out of his house. Not really sure why she said that. I don't know if she was trying to make it seem like I was nervous, but I didn't even shut the door. Like when I walked outside and met the officer, the door's wide open. You can see it on his body cam footage. She said that I was a danger to my wife and society because I had a history of showing up at my son's school and showing out and was not allowed to pick him up from school. Never happened. There was nothing was written that I wasn't able to come to the school. She made it seem like I wasn't even allowed to go to the school where my son was at and pick him up. That never took place. She said that she recovered 1 vial of steroids from the house where they were renting. Her own report was written that she recovered too. So she was just constantly, like I said, not huge lies, but definitely lies. And you're on the stand for a murder case. And the judge almost, like you could tell she was reluctant. She was almost about to toss it. And she was like, you know what, given the situation, even though there's not a lot here, I'm going to bind it to trial. So the next step, obviously my lawyer's like, all right, what we're going to do is file what's called a Duncan hearing. And he was like, that's based on the grounds of castle law and self-defense. And he's like, that's our next step. So they hire a CSI forensics guy from New York, fly him in, and they set up like everything in the kitchen with like the lasers, going from bullet point to wherever. So they could see where I was standing. It went to the wall, to the refrigerator, then from the refrigerator back to the corner. And it painted a very clear picture that I was standing exactly where I said I was standing. Because my lawyer told me one time we were talking, he's like, look, he's like, don't lie to me. He's like, because I have the guys that's going to be able to tell me if you're lying. And he's like, I can't do my job if you're lying. And I'm like, bro, I'm telling you, everything I'm telling you is the God's honest truth. And he said when they done that, he told the CSI guy in private, he's telling the truth. Everything he said's checked out. And I said, well, I was in a unique position to where I didn't have to lie. Like everything happened the way I said. And so all the evidence just started piling up in our favor. And they were like, we feel good about this. And they're trying to push to get this Duncan hearing going. Then COVID happens. So the courts just come to a standstill. Nobody's doing anything. Everybody's scared. You got mask updates. And my lawyer didn't want to do anything through Zoom or any kind of virtual meet. And so he's like, I'm just going to push it off. If you're good, then I'm good. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm good. I could stand up, maybe be making a little bit more money, but I'm decent. The company that I'm working for at the time knows nothing. At this point in job, I didn't tell them about anything. I just told them I was looking for a new job. So I was like, kind of nervous that they might see it in the paper or hear something about it or whatever. The guy comes to me and he's like, we're going to do an install at your old job. And I'm like, oh, yeah? And he's like, I said, where? He's like, Nucor, we got to put an LED sign in out there. I'm like, all right. And I was like, do I got to go on this install? And he's like, no, you don't have to go. I'm like, good. I'm thinking if I'm not out there, nobody will recognize me, whatever. Lo and behold, somebody's talking to somebody. They say, we got a guy at our shop used to work out here. Who? Wade. Oh, yeah. How's everything going with his case? What case? You know, he got arrested for murder, didn't he? Huh? Nobody out there knew. Then now everybody at the new job knows.
Oh, man.
I know they know, but nobody says anything. So that's even, like, in a way, that's even worse because I know they know, but nobody's saying anything about it. So I don't know whether if they're waiting. I don't know whether the guy's mad because I didn't tell him. But I knew that he knew because every now and again we would have to go to like Army bases or military bases to do jobs. They would never send me there because I couldn't because you had to clear their backgrounds. Yeah. Everywhere else they would send me. So I knew they know, but they never say anything. COVID comes. Eventually, I actually wound up losing that job. Luckily, got another one. Still doing welding and fabricating. This guy was from Texas. I told him the whole story. He was like, man, I'm from Texas. You didn't do nothing I wouldn't do. You know, glad to have you. Welcome aboard. Great dude. And I stayed with him until this thing kind of found a conclusion. And through this whole time, my lawyer, like I said, is not wanting to do anything over Zoom. Finally, like I said, I started this podcast. I was going to New York a few times, interviewing some old guys that were in the mob. I had to get permission to go to New York. So I had to submit permission to the prosecutor or solicitor, and they agreed. They let me go to New York. Again, charging me with murder. You got me on house arrest, but yeah, go to New York.
Did they offer you a plea deal at all?
Never did.
Never did.
Never offered me anything.
You would have thought they wanted to fish something out just to see if you would take it.
Just to see. And I kept thinking that, and my lawyer kept telling me that they probably would.
What were you facing?
Life.
You would have thought if they knew that they had a weak case, I would say, hey, here's 20 or 15.
Exactly.
Would you have taken that?
No.
Okay. So regardless, you weren't taking it.
No. Well, to start with, I've got 60, 70 grand invested in a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm not paying all that money to still go away for 20 years.
Did you have to pay more money too?
Yeah. It wound up being much. I think altogether now, after everything's said and done, about 100 grand.
Okay. So did you actually go through a full trial or it didn't get there?
No, it didn't get there. When they're giving me permission to go to New York, I went once. That was in like July of last year. I wound up having to take a second trip in September. And again, we have to file paperwork every time. My lawyer's like, look, this is getting ridiculous. Like, let's just get this immunity hearing over with. And there was a new solicitor on the case. The original solicitor left. They brought in a woman. The woman left. They brought in a new guy. Now, this guy really didn't know much about the case. So my lawyer called me on the phone and he's like, I'm thinking about just laying everything out. He's like, I'm thinking about showing them everything that we have, and I think it'll be damning enough to where they're going to drop it. And he's like, but it's a risk because we're showing our hand. And I'm like, bro, I trust you. Like, do whatever you want to do. And so he set it up. And we go to the police station, and our CSI guy had to fly him back down. So those are all expenses. Every time somebody out of state comes, you got to pay their flights, you got to pay their hotels, you got to pay them to do all this. And he puts together a PowerPoint. So like I told them, hey, when this first started, we wrestled around in the kitchen. They said, well, we didn't see any signs of a struggle. So he takes the first arising officer's body cam footage and he highlights that there's knocked over shot glasses on the floor in the kitchen. Also knocked over glasses on the counter, like a big rocks, like Manhattan glass, knocked over. And he's like, that looks like signs of a struggle to me. Like, I'm sure the guy just don't have glasses laying around on his floor like that. The next thing was he didn't have any blood on him, so we don't think they were in close contact. I was wearing a long sleeve white T-shirt, in fact, that night. And so that was kind of a thing where he didn't have any blood on him, so how close could they have really been? They done like so many studies on like blood spatter, why you don't get blood spatter, depending on, like we mentioned earlier, gun, caliber of bullet, all that. The guy that night was wearing 3 layers of clothes. He had on like a T-shirt, a long sleeve T-shirt, and then kind of like not a hoodie, but like a real thin, long sleeve shirt with a hood over it that was like a wicking material because it was a little chilly. It wasn't going to travel through all that. You're not going to get back spatter on me. And that was a key thing that they focused on was because I was wearing a white shirt and I had no blood on me, they were trying to say that we were farther apart. And that's a lot of what they based their case on. Well, the problem with that is when you stand this guy up in front of me, when they come in, you could see right where he was laying. He wasn't up against the refrigerator. He was about a foot from it. So he couldn't have been farther back because then he's going to be laying up against the refrigerator. He had to be close enough to where he fell straight back. The bullet pass were entering at one point, then exiting at a lower point. So how does that happen? I've got to be charging at you, crouched over, coming at you like in a football tackle type position for it to go in high and exit lower. So everything I'm saying is adding up. They lay out that to the district or the solicitor. They're very receptive to it. They leave. They're supposed to go see what they have on me. Now, I can't go in there. My lawyer and investigators and everybody can, but I can't. So they said, we're going to come to your house. You just go into your house and we'll meet you there in a little bit. Well, my investigator is the first one to get there. And I'm asking him, I was like, so what do they have? And he's like, nothing. And I'm like, what do you mean nothing? And he's like, dude, they have your gun and your clothes and the few things they took from your house, and that's it. They don't have anything.
Yeah, there's no audio recording, video statements, nothing.
Yeah, there's no nothing. And I'm just like, so what the hell we've been doing these last 5 years? And so they finally come. The solicitor comes in the house. Everything in my kitchen is the same. I never moved the refrigerator. I never moved anything. I never replaced anything. The stickers that they put on where it ricocheted on the wall is still there.
Yeah.
I didn't cover up nothing because I had a feeling deep down that at some point this kitchen was going to be key to being able to resolve this whole thing. And so I lay it out for him. I'm saying, all right, we were here. He come up here. We rolled here. He done this. I done this. I let him hold the glass that was on the counter knocked over so he could feel the weight of it. I told him, I'm like, all right, I'm here. I shoot this way. That's this bullet that hits that ricochets over here. The other one went into a 24 pack of water. They never found that when they were doing the investigation, mind you.
Wow.
I found it after I got back from when they told me to go to my neighbor's house and hang out. I found the bullet later on. So that's just a kind of a insight into the depth of investigation that was done. They didn't even find one of the bullets. I had to call them to come back out and get it. So after all that, you can tell he's really taking the info in. He's not just brushing it off. It's not just lip service. And he asked me a couple questions. I mean, nothing like too in depth. He asked me, I want to say specifically, he was like, what was his mood like? And I'm like, well, to start with, it was good. Like, in the very beginning of the conversation, obviously it was a little hostile. I was like, then it got better. And I said, then we were cool. I was like, he just flipped. I said, when he went to that bathroom and he come out, I said, he was a totally different person.
Yeah.
And so they leave, and we were sitting around, my lawyer, investigator, all of us were talking. I was like, well, we think that went good. And I'm like, how long do you think it'll, take before they find out something? And he's like, who knows? He said it could be months, weeks, or whatever. This was like the beginning of September, or end of August, beginning of September. My birthday's Labor Day, so I'm hoping for that to be like the best birthday present ever, to get this thing dropped. Doesn't happen. Go through September. I think we have a hurricane coming. A lot of people evacuated. I told my lawyer, I'm like, make sure they don't let that file for my, case dismissed float away for this hurricane. Finally, October, the week before Halloween last year, I'm at work and I get a phone call. It's my lawyer. Now, I'm not like, he called me, pretty regularly, so I'm not thinking, oh, this is it. Call him up and he's like, Wade, what are you doing? I said, I'm working, man. And he said, well, how does it feel to be a free man?
Oh, wow.
And brother, when he said that, like, I'll admit, I went to crying, like I couldn't hold it together. I was so emotional. It was like the biggest weight you could ever imagine getting lifted off me. And I mean, like after a few minutes of, just being real emotional, I was like, are you serious? Like it's over? He's like, it's done. He's like, case is dismissed.
That's awesome.
And it's been a wild ride since then, man. Like I said, I've kind of made it a point because I built a little platform with my show that I really wanted to highlight people that have been in similar situations that didn't have the outcome that I did. And, because that's not all my show's about, but that's something that I really take seriously because, dude, there's not a doubt in my mind that had I not had a job, that I had me a 401k already set up in a pretty decent amount, I could very well be in a jail cell right now. And I know that's happened to people.
Or a supportive family.
Yeah, or a supportive family, exactly. So you take a kid that's poor, that has no family, that's in this situation, that acted within his right to do so, but doesn't have the support system or the friends or the financial means to get a good lawyer, they're going to prison for a very long time and didn't do anything wrong. So I'm blessed, and I want to be able to use my story as a cautionary tale that you can do everything right. You can do everything by the letter of the law. And because of an overzealous detective, I lost pretty much 5 years of my life being able to do what I want. Like, I couldn't go to weddings. I couldn't go to parties, birthday parties, deaths. One of my best friends died. I couldn't go to his funeral. Like, in the beginning, they wouldn't give me nothing. There was no leeway. As the years went on, I would kind of get leeway here and there, but it still wasn't a lot. And, like, I'm a very outgoing person, so sitting in a house is not ideal for somebody like me.
You lost time.
Yeah, time.
You could get money back. You can't get time.
Yeah. Well, I don't even get the money back. Like, I'm thinking, all right, well,
there's
now
no
that they've
options
dropped
for you
this.
to sue or anything, right?
Yeah, there's no options because it's the difference between malicious prosecution and basically incompetence. And so I'm saying, like, all right, so these cops can be full-blown idiots and charge people.
And screw up someone's life.
And then at the end of it, when it's done, oh, well, my bad.
Do you think you needed to go through this whole situation to be who you are today?
To be who I am today, absolutely. And to look at things differently, because I was that guy that if I'm sitting at home, I've come home from work, I flip on the news, so-and-so killed so-and-so, he's arrested. Hell, glad they caught him. I see it on the news. I believed it. I thought that's how it was. I didn't think there was another side to the story. Now, when I see that, I look at everything from a different set of eyes. Matter of fact, it was like 2 weeks after I got out, they arrested a kid for shooting his father. And so immediately my mind goes, what did the father do? Why did the kid do that? Was the father beating on the mom? Was he beating on the sister? Was he beating on the son? Was he forced? I'm looking at it from different sets of eyes, trying to figure out why he was doing what he was doing.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly.
I think that's definitely a hitting point for your story.
Yeah, because you don't know. And so many people would read that in the news and they say, oh, well, he done this and he done that. And I've had so many people, they'll see my story on some of these podcasts and they listen to a part of it. They don't listen to the whole thing. It's like, what happens to the days when you used to throw hands and shit? I'm like, look, I live beside, I want to say apartment complex, but I live a subdivision over from that dude for 6 months. If he wanted to throw hands, we could have threw hands. He waited to that day when that happened, when he knew I couldn't physically do anything about it. That's not my fault.
If you could change one thing that you did, looking back on everything, what would you change? Knowing everything you know now, knowing what you've become from this experience. And it could be you don't want to change a thing.
I got to say it's that. I don't know if I want to change anything. Because had I make that choice, just say I didn't say, all right, you're not coming back over. I don't want to have you at the house. So that night doesn't happen. But that don't mean that another night don't happen. And that don't mean that another night don't go a different way. Say the situation was different that night and he got me. He took me out. Then what's to stop him from going back over to where my wife's at and taking her out, my son out, and my daughter out? He could have went back there and done it that night. Had I said, hey, I don't know if we need to hang out. I'm going to just take you on over there. He could have went over there and killed them. If he was ready, set in his mind to kill me, who was to say he couldn't have done it to them?
Yeah.
So obviously, yes, this whole thing flipped me upside down, inside out. It, was a very big financial strain for sure. It's made me look at life totally different, gave me a whole new perspective on life. It's allowed me to get into a different thing like this podcast and to be able to talk to people and talk to so many cool people too, like movie stars and guys from like the Sopranos TV shows and Tommy Chong and just cool people that I would have never gotten into this had this not happened. So hell of a path to travel to get here, but I don't think I would change anything. I'm satisfied with the way things have worked themselves out. Now I feel like I have the duty to help spread the word and at least put out awareness that these kind of things can happen if you're not careful. And I know there's an insurance that you can buy for situations like this. It's called Carry Guard or something. I need to get up with them and be their spokesperson. Like, I need to be their poster child because that's exactly what this is.
Do you still carry a gun now?
Yeah, I got everything back. Once the car charges were dropped, I got all the guns back that I give my lawyer. So that was the first step. I reapplied for my CWP. It got reinstated, and I actually got the gun back that I used that night, along with everything else they took from me.
Would you think differently the next time you're in that situation again?
That situation, no, I don't think so.
If that presented itself,
if that same situation presented itself, probably be the same way. I'm gonna be a lot more apprehensive as far as putting myself in a situation where that could possibly happen. And when I hadn't touched a gun since that happened. So when I first got all the guns back, the other guns, it wasn't such a big deal. Like, I had them, I put them, where I had them before. When I got that one back, like, I'll be honest, I don't know if I've touched it since then. I've got it put up. I've got it, but I don't know if I've touched it since then. That one's it's a little tricky going down memory lane with that one because I know what was involved with it.
Have you done any therapy or anything to help you heal through this situation?
I seen a psychiatrist for a little bit while it was going on, but I just didn't feel like they were really connecting with what my issues were. And the biggest therapy for me has been actually going on shows like yours and some other platforms that I've went on and talking about it, because I'm able to break everything down. I'm able to talk freely. And to where some things I believe I could tell you that I don't know if a shrink would actually listen to or really take in the grasp of it. Because guys like, yourself and, other individuals that I've talked with, they've seen the way the system is. They get it. A straight-laced lawyer that have never found themselves in a jail ain't really going to pick up exactly everything I'm putting down.
Absolutely, yeah.
And like I said, I don't want to make this like I've been to prison for some long stretch. I did 2.5 days. That was enough for me. I hope I don't ever go back. But the way the system is, guys like yourself and other individuals that are on these types of platforms, they get it because they were there. They've seen the way it works. They know how dirty it is. So I get my therapy from doing that.
Absolutely. Well, Wade, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely, my friend.
Means a lot. It was a great story, great conversation. Excited to see where you take it and change lives and use that inspirational story that could be found in the darkest of places.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing, man. When it gets you down, I heard so many times it told me, oh, you got it. Don't worry about it. That doesn't help because until it's gone, you're still going to think about it. And then once it's over, you can look back and you can say, look at everything I come through.
Absolutely.
And that's where we're at.